I'm Dr. Kathy Kezelman. I'm President and Executive Director of Blue Knot Foundation. I joined Blue Knot a long time ago because I'm a survivor myself of different forms of trauma, and I was looking for help. So that's when I first found the organisation, and it certainly inspired me to try and find ways to support other people who are struggling in their own lives with experiences of violence and abuse. When people think about trauma, they think about the trauma of a natural disaster or an accident or an assault in adulthood, and not to ever minimise anyone's trauma. But when we talk about complex trauma, we talk about experiences of what we call interpersonal trauma, so violence, abuse, neglect, exploitation. And it's often repeated, it often occurs over time, and it's often extreme. And it can occur as a child, as a young person, or as an adult. So complex trauma, people who've experienced complex trauma often have experienced trauma over a long period of time. And particularly if it occurs during the early developmental years, when the brain is growing and developing, when you're learning about the world, it really impacts your very core sense of safety, who you are, your relationships, and many other things. And unfortunately, there are lots of ways in which people can experience trauma. When you've experienced trauma, often it's like you have a target on your head saying to re-traumatise me. And so, people who've experienced, say, sexual abuse as a child, often that is accompanied by other forms of violation. So it's quite common, for people who've been sexually abused to experience emotional abuse, to experience neglect. They also may growing up in circumstances of disadvantage. They may be homeless. And so often these compound and the impact over time become cumulative. So unfortunately, there are many ways in which people can experience trauma. And also, of course, we've seen with COVID that the whole world has experienced trauma. And so for people who are already traumatised, that adds another layer as well. It's very hard for survivors to speak about trauma and to reach out and seek help, because obviously this sort of trauma, which has been perpetrated by another human being, means that you find it hard to trust because you've been found betrayed. And some survivors really struggle to have a felt sense of safety. They've never felt safe. And so if they're reaching out to you in any way, it means that you're someone that they may have just that little bit of trust with, and they're putting their toe in the water. So the best thing you can do is to be there for someone and listen and hear and believe. Not try and fix things, not try and solve things, not try and tell your story of your own stuff, but just be there. What is it someone needs in that moment to help them to feel safe, to help them to feel grounded, because they're taking a very risk by sharing with you. Everyone's journey, just as we're all very individual, we all have very different backgrounds, very different experiences. So there's no one path to healing. And, seeking help from practitioners is a choice. And, what we know is that unfortunately, some practitioners have not been trained in how to respond to people with this form of trauma. And so the disconnect between survivors who really struggle to reach out and struggle to trust, and practitioners who may not have expertise and the understanding to be there in the way that survivors need, can make that challenging. Many practitioners also are fantastic. And so it's about looking around and really exploring, firstly, who you feel that you can engage with, who you feel you can trust. And if it's a therapeutic process that you want to undertake, then absolutely seeking out who may be able to walk alongside you as long as it takes, because, it's not a linear journey. Different people may seek different forms of therapy and different forms of support at different times in their journey. So it's definitely not one size fits all. It's about exploring what is going to be helpful for you at that point in time, and finding a person who can actually deliver it and who you can feel safe and can trust to be there with you. Even when people don't see the possibility of hope and the possibility of healing, that there is support and there is help, and Blue Knot's there to guide people on the way. We also provide many resources on our website for survivors and family members, and we also do a lot of professional development training and supervision for practitioners and people working or engaging with survivors in many different environments, just to enable the workforce to better support people to feel safe, because survivors often have many needs. They're often struggling with their mental health, their physical health, their well-being, the ability to hold down a job, to have a relationship, and their very core sense of themselves. So there's many ways in which survivors need support. And I think as a community, if we can just start to be more real, less dismissive. Obviously, it's very challenging to talk about abuse and neglect, but it's far more challenging for the person who's experienced it. So let's put the humanity back in all of us, and the humanity back in the service system, and walk alongside each other to create a world of acceptance and support.